Great. It looks like we are now live with our attendees. So welcome everyone to today's webinar hosted by Congresswoman Norma Torres on summer travel and passports and everything related to potentially having a somewhat more normal summer this year as folks get vaccinated and get prepared to visit family and friends and things like that. We are fortunate to have the LA Passport Agency with us, as well as the California Department of Motor Vehicles and the Consulate of Mexico in San Bernardino, who will give some insight into traveling protocol, ID requirements, passport waiting times, and everything under the sun in terms of what you need to get traveling this summer. So we are looking forward to having a productive conversation. Real quick before we get started here, I just want to let everyone know that if you do have a question, feel free to submit it in the Q&A section on your screen. We will get to them during our Q&A session, and feel free to direct questions to any of our panelists. They're happy to answer any concerns or questions you have. So with that, though, I will turn it over to Congresswoman Torres, who will give a quick update on Washington, and then also just the purpose of why she's hosting this webinar today. Congresswoman?
Well, thank you, Jacob, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for our passport webinar with experts in the field. After a 15-month quarantine scheduled to end on June 15th, I am sure that many of you are already getting vaccinated and getting ready for a vacation or visit a family member or friends. So what that entails is more than getting the right pair of sunglasses and sunscreen. It's a little more. And today, I hope that we will be able to answer some of your questions. Summer travel, this summer travel webinar is designed to help you get informed and make thoughtful plans to get the most out of your trip while staying safe. I want to begin by thanking our speakers for taking the time to join us today in this webinar. Their expertise will be extremely helpful for all of you on the call today. Many of us are adjusting to the idea of beginning to travel again, so questions regarding passports and travel restrictions and protocols may be on your mind. It is important to note that some destinations may require a COVID-19 test upon arrival, upon boarding or arrival. So as you book your flights, you can often find routes departing from our very own local airport, ONT. There are over 11 airlines with service to Ontario, and many international flights that were suspended due to the pandemic are now returning. So don't forget to check our own local airport first. And for your convenience, there is a 1-hour COVID testing on site available at Terminal 4. You can visit covidclinic.org for more information about that. However, it is important to note that while we are making strides against the pandemic in the US, that is not necessarily the case across the globe. So if you are traveling internationally, be aware of the COVID-19 travel advisories that may impact your plans. Last month, Canada and India were added to the level 4 do not travel advisory. And on Monday, Japan was included in that list. You may also want to check your country of travel to see if there are established quarantines at your destination or a US established quarantine upon return. So you can even enroll your trip in a smart travel enrollment program to get all of the travel alerts related to where you are traveling to. You can do that by going to step.state.gov. And most importantly, you will need a valid US passport for you and your children, which makes the perfect segue to introduce our first panelist. I hope that you will find the information discussed in this summer travel webinar very helpful as you make much of your anticipated plans for travel. And with that, I will return it back to you, Jacob.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So first on our presentation list today is Chan Shiv with the Los Angeles Passport Agency. And he's here to give a little more insight into passport processing and other travel related information that you'd want to know. Chan?
Thanks, Jacob. And thank you, Congresswoman Norma Torres. Thanks for having us. And thank you for giving that spiel, because I think I'm done. I don't have anything else to say. You know, the best place to get prepared, as you mentioned, is to go online and to go to travel.state.gov. I've highlighted there on our on this slide here. But before you go, there's 3 questions you should ask yourself. Do you have your passport? Do your family members have their passports? And are your passports valid for at least 6 months? Now, if you check yes to all those boxes, great, but wait, don't book your trip just yet. As Congresswoman Torres has mentioned, you know, there are restrictions that might require you to quarantine before traveling to the destination, and to find out if there are any restrictions for the latest information on country-specific advisories, visit travel.state.gov. Okay, next please, Jacob. And again, if you have any questions, you know, after all the presentations, feel free to ask, and I'll go over more specific ones with you. Secondly, if you don't have a valid passport or you need one, you know, apply for it well ahead of your travel. So something to also consider is, do you need a visa to travel to the country you're going to? And you can find out if you do by going to travel.state.gov and clicking on, typing in the country you plan to visit or countries you plan to visit. Thankfully, Mexico is not one of those countries. So, and Hugo will talk more about that. But if you do need to apply, the processing times for applying at a local facility, such as a designated post office or city clerks or city library, or libraries rather, are 10 to 12 weeks for routine service. That's door to door. So if you apply now, you can expect your passport by routine service to be delivered to you in about 10 to 12 weeks. If you wanted to expedite the processing, it comes at an additional optional $60 fee, and that's 4 to 6 weeks service door to door. Now, if you're really in a bind, right now during the pandemic, passport agencies such as ours in Los Angeles, we're located in West LA, by the way. We have extremely limited appointments, and we're serving life and death emergencies, as well as those who are traveling urgently within 72 hours. But not all passport agencies fall under the same criteria. So it's best to check travel.state.gov, as some passport agencies are only serving life or death appointments. We're an exception. We've expanded it, though still limited to urgent travelers within 72 hours. You must have proof of travel upon arriving at the agency, and you also have to pay the expedite fee. We're able to deliver the passport in under the 4 to 6 week service if you apply to a passport agency. At this point, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Eugene Agassiwara. We were having some technical difficulties. He was supposed to appear in a separate screen, but he's going to share mine. So I'll hand it over to Eugene right now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eugene Agassiwara. I'm also a customer service manager at the Los Angeles Passport Agency, and I will be discussing the next slide, which is our online status check tool. So applicants who have already applied for a passport can obtain status updates online at passportstatus.state.gov. And on the status check website, applicants may see the following 4 status updates. So first, you may see not available, and please do not be alarmed if you see this message. All this means is that the application is most likely at our mail processing facility being prepped for distribution to one of our passport agencies. The next status update you may see is in process, and this means that the application has been sent to a passport agency to be adjudicated or reviewed. And please note that it may take up to 4 weeks from the time that a customer applied for the application to appear in the system as in process. And during those first 4 weeks, the application is delivered to the mail processing site. The payment is processed. There's some initial data entry going on, and the application is then shipped to a passport agency to be adjudicated. The third status update that you will see is approved. And what this means is that the application has been approved by a passport specialist at a passport agency, and the information has been electronically or digitally sent to a remote book print facility for the passport to be printed. And finally, once the entire process is complete, when a customer checks online, they will see that it has been, quote, mailed. And all this means is that the passport has been mailed to the customer. Next slide, please. Now, while our services have been limited more so than before the pandemic, there are online resources that are available to customers, and there's a lot of valuable information that they can find there. So first and foremost, travel.state.gov, our website has a wealth of information on it, on anything from how to apply for a passport. It has forms, passport forms on there, Q&As regarding the most common passport related questions. It also has entry/exit requirements for foreign countries. It just has a whole bunch of great information. So if customers or your constituents have any questions about passports, travel.state.gov is a great resource to point them towards. Also, in travel.state.gov, there's a few other things that are available that are very helpful. So we have the Integrated Acceptance Facility Database, and that allows customers to find an acceptance facility in their area that they can go and apply for a passport for. All they would have to do is punch in their zip code, and you'll get results for like the 10 closest acceptance facilities in your area. Another useful tool is our online passport agency appointment system. And this would allow customers to make an appointment at one of the passport agencies in our country. And I would also just like to briefly talk about the USPS appointment scheduling system. This would allow customers to make appointments at a post office to apply for a passport. And finally, of course, as I had discussed in the prior slide, you can also check online in terms of your status of your passport application as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me your chance at the very end of this presentation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Chans and Eugene, for that update from the State Department on passport services. I'm sure some of our constituents will have questions for you all when we get to that portion of the programming. But next, I do want to turn it over to Hugo Rivera Oliva Romero from who is the Associate Consul at the Consulate General of Mexico in San Bernardino. And he's here to hopefully give some information to those who may be interested in visiting family or friends in Mexico and what may be needed to do that amid all of that's going on. Hugo? Hugo, I believe you're mute.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, all American citizens that want to travel to Mexico, they don't need a visa to travel for 6 months. And all people who has American visa don't need visa to travel to Mexico. It's the same thing. So they can stay 6 months, and if they want to spend more time in Mexico, they have to apply for a different visa. We have a visa for temporary residents without authorization for lucrative activities. This visa is only and exclusively if you will do one of the following: traveling to Mexico for retirements, investments, professional activities, technical activities, artistic activities, scientific activities, sport activities, or as a minister of the religion. You will stay in Mexico for more than 6 months for regular tourists. You do not have a work authorization. It's a different visa to work in Mexico or to have lucrative activities. If any of these situations suit you, you will need to present the following requirement. Fill the application in person at the consulate. Mexico has 50 consulates in the United States. For instance, California has 10, Arizona 5, and Texas 11. The rest of the consulates is all around the United States. Present a valid passport in original and one photocopy of pages containing personal information, photograph or barrier, and expiration date too. Valid US visa for multiple entries and one photocopy only for non-US citizens. Provide either or the following forms: I-94, I-20, J1, and or I-797 in original or one photocopy, nor for US citizen, and one passport sizes photo, no glasses. Proof of economic solvency. Example include bank statements for the past 6 months, investments, and if you are in possession of US property, please provide paperwork from your person if you have one. Proof of no criminal record used by the police department or in your city. And there is another kind of visa when people wants to be permanent resident. If you wish to move and live in Mexico permanently, you may instead apply for a permanent resident visa. And they have to bring the aforementioned document as well as the following: grant deed or property owned in the United States, latest income tax report, and documentation or property owned in Mexico, also known as fideicomiso. It's very important for us that people who wants to live in Mexico as a permanent resident show all the documents, because they have to stay more than 6 months and they have to do different activities. And with visitors with authorization for remunerated payments, it's a work visa. It's for foreigners who wish to travel to Mexico with the intent to conduct remunerated activities, must have an offer of employment. The Mexican institution or person who intends to hire the foreigners must submit the visa application directly to the National Immigration Institute. In Mexico, the embassy or consulate may only issue a visa if it has been authorized by the institute. It is very important because we can apply here in the consulate and we receive a special number, yeah, and the name of the person who is travel to Mexico. And we can issue the visa, and when they arrive to Mexico, they can change the visa for another visa. But they have to get the visa here first before travel to Mexico. And it's very easy because when they go to Mexico, they show the visa that issued by this consulate, and they have to follow in the next format and complete the format, and they receive a different visa in Mexico. But they can come first with us or with any other consulate in the United States. And once the foreigner has the corresponding authorization, he or she must appear in the person or any Mexican consulate with the following requirement. Fill the application in person at this consulate. Authorization by the National Migration Institute with is a NUT is the special number that I explained, and a letter of invitation by the employer stating the place, contract, length, and salary. Fill out the application form and valid passport, original and a photocopy. One photo, passport size, no glasses, and bank statements with a proven income of $1,700 monthly, last 3 months, or your bank statement in the US dollars, pay stubs or employment letter specifying your position and salary or credit card statements. If applicable, you must submit official documents provided the ownership of the US property, company, businesses, and one photocopy, example, the deed or your house. Proof of no criminal record issued by the police department in your city. It is very, very important because a criminal cannot go to another country. It's for security for all people, not only for foreigners, but for nationals too. And with the pandemic, it's a special protocols. As you know, the border is closed, and we don't know when the U.S. government will open the border. So we are waiting for the decision of the American government to open the border, and then they modify the protocols. When the people travel to Mexico and they come back to the United States, they have show the testing COVID 22 hours before flight to the United States. Different because here in the United States, one person shows the vaccine card, they can travel without testing COVID-19. So it's very different. And finally, I am very proud to say that we delivered the Mexican passport in less than 1 hour in every consulate. So one Mexican come to the consulate, apply for the passport, and in less than 1 hour, they receive the new one.
Great. Thank you so much for that update, Hugo. I think if we have any questions, further questions about traveling to Mexico and what that looks like, I'm sure that we can turn to you to be a good resource on that. But our next presenter here is Amy Tanner, who is with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. I know a lot of folks have heard about the Real ID requirement that has continued to be postponed in terms of its deadline. So she's here today to talk to you a little bit more about that and what that looks like moving forward for domestic travel, within the United States. Amy?
Great, thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Congresswoman Torres, for hosting this and inviting me. We'll go to our next slide. All right, so the Federal Real ID Act places new rules on which form of identification may be used to board flights within the United States and enter secure federal facilities such as military bases, federal courthouses, and other federal facilities. This does not include locations such as post offices. A California issued Real ID driver license or identification card meets these requirements, and it is marked with a golden bear and a star. So starting May 3rd, 2023, you will need to show a Real ID driver license or identification card or another federally approved identification at TSA airport checkpoints nationwide or to visit secure federal facilities. We can go to the next slide. Great. So California issues two different types of driver license or identifications cards. You'll see here on the left, we have the Real ID card. From the image, you can see the bear with the star in the corner. The other card is the federal non-compliant card. This card will be marked Federal Limits Apply in the top right corner. The Real ID driver license, to apply for one, you must visit a DMV in person and you must provide one identity document, two documents showing your California residency, provide your social security number. You will additionally pay a fee, we'll take your photo and your thumbprint. The Real ID driver license can be used to fly within the United States. You can use it to enter secure federal facilities. And if you already have your Real ID, you're able to renew that card online. If you opt to not apply for a Real ID, you will be issued a driver license or identification card marked Federal Limits Apply. This beginning May 3rd, 2023, you will not be able to use this identification to board a domestic flight. You will have to provide some other document. So if we can go to our next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how to apply. So if you can queue up our video, DMV has created a handy how-to video on our YouTube channel that walks you through the steps.
Within the United States and enter secure federal facilities, the application process is easy. You'll find all of the information you'll need at realid.dmv.ca.gov. Here's what you'll need to do. To start the process, fill out the online application, upload the necessary documents, and print a photo of the confirmation code. Next, head to your nearest DMV office where you'll complete your Real ID application. You'll need to take your documents with you, along with the confirmation code, which is your reservation, or you can schedule an appointment. So now let's take a look at the application process a little closer. First, you'll need to round up the documents required by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. You'll need an identity document, like a valid U.S. passport or an original or certified birth certificate. If the name you're using today is different than the one that appears on that document, then you'll need to provide documentation to show why you changed your name. Maybe you got married or divorced, you were adopted, or entered into a domestic partnership. This is very important. If you've been married several times and changed your name numerous times, then you'll need to provide documentation to show that progression. In other words, you'll need to provide a marriage certificate, then your divorce decree, then the next marriage certificate, and so on. Again, this is a federal requirement. Next, you'll need to provide two documents that prove you're a California resident. You can use things like utility or cell phone bills, bank or mortgage statements. Even your vehicle registration will work. Just make sure they show your name, or that your name can be linked to you through the documents you provided. Your residency documents must also show your physical home address. If you use a P.O. box, one of them must show both your physical address and P.O. box. And finally, you'll have to provide your social security number. After you've uploaded all of these documents, you'll need to take them with you to a DMV office where you'll complete your Real ID application. And don't forget to bring a printed copy or photo of your confirmation code. If you have more questions or would like to see a complete list of documents that you can use to apply for a Real ID, visit realid.dmv.ca.gov.
Wonderful. And so again, we want to reiterate that realid.dmv.ca.gov is where to go to get all the information you're going to need to apply for a Real ID. We have an interactive document checklist. For example, we mentioned that you could provide an original certified birth certificate or passport. There's also other documents that are available that may meet your needs, such as an I-94 with a valid visa. All those documents are identified on that website, so you can check your boxes and make sure that you have your list presented. The website also shows you again the difference between a Real ID and the federal non-compliant card, so you can be informed about the outcomes of your choices. We have other resources available, such as printable guides in multiple languages and frequently asked questions. We really want to stress that you start your application ahead of time online and you upload your documents via our web application. This will save you time when you go into our field office to present them. Folks are getting in and out within 10 to 15 minutes right now to complete the Real ID transaction. So we're trying to make this as painless as possible. Any questions? Please feel free to ask me after this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that presentation. And that actually is a good segue into our question and answer session. So if you have not submitted any questions in the Q&A, feel free to do so if you have any. I do have some questions that folks submitted when they registered for the webinar, so I will go through some of those. But first, I did want to go back to Amy really quickly. Amy, was there a change to the Social Security card requirement for Real ID recently? I know you still need your Social Security number, but there was, I believe, a change with the documentation requirement.
Correct. Initially, upon implementation, you were required to provide proof of your Social Security number. So you needed to bring us in your physical card. So recent changes based on the Real ID Modernization Act that was passed through Congress recently eliminated that requirement and allows states to simply take the number. So one less document that you need to bring to DMV.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Next, I do want to turn it over back to Chans for a question about passports. We have a constituent from Fontana who has a question about applying for passports for their children. What is the process for applying for a child passport, and do both parents need to be there to do so?
Oh, thanks for that question. So all children must appear in person. Children cannot renew their passport or apply by mail. So the parents have to locate an acceptance facility if they're in no hurry to get a passport. Of course, if they're in a rush, they can make an appointment to apply at our office. But the child must appear in person, and both parents must consent for a minor to get their passport. All minors under 16 require both parents' consent. Minors who are 16 and 17 just need one parent's consent. And they'll need to fill out our DS11 passport application form. They'll need one passport photo. It's 2x2 for their child, that's without glasses. They have to, it's kind of hard to take pictures of children, we understand. Sometimes we can't get them to look straight in the camera, but as best as they can, present a photo that's acceptable, and they can go onto our website, again, travel.state.gov, to get examples of what's acceptable for a child's photo. What's acceptable is a child appearing before a blank, a white screen. It's not dark. What's not acceptable is if the parent appears in the photo as well, like holding the child in a baby carrier. That's, unfortunately, we don't accept that. The child will have to be, just by him or herself in front of the blank screen. I know that's difficult. Whoever's taking the photo should get an award for that. Along with the photo, they'll also need their proof of citizenship. So that would be their original certified birth certificate. for a list of more birth citizenship evidence, they can also go to our website. But they do need proof of citizenship. And along with proof of U.S. citizenship, they also need proof of relation to the parents. So the birth certificate has that as well. It has the parents' information, and both parents who are listed on the birth certificate must consent to the passport. Now, if there's only one parent on the birth certificate, only that one parent has to appear and consent for the child's passport. And also the parent must present acceptable identification, and the best identification for someone living in California would be a California ID. And we do accept both the federal limits apply ID and the real ID California ID. So there's no need to rush to get the real ID for that purpose. We would accept the federal limits apply for passport applications.
Great, thank you so much for that. I have one more question.
Chance,
Go
Oh,
ahead.
yes. Yes.
can you clarify for foster children or an adopted child
Sure.
that would have, a birth certificate with a parent that is no longer in the picture? So adoption papers would be sufficient for on that?
Absolutely. So if it's an adoptive parent or a foster parent, whoever is the legal guardian of the child is entitled to apply and consent to the passport application. And that in those cases, they would have to bring the original certified court order and present that to the acceptance agent. They will have to release that to us, but we'll return all documentations once we complete processing the application. If there are any questions about, who is the guardian, legal guardian, we'll follow up with, requesting for more documentation, because we don't want to issue passports to a minor and then have, an adult take them out of the country without the legal guardian or the parents' awareness.
Great. Thank you for that.
Oh,
I
sure.
do want to turn it over to Hugo really quickly. So one question that folks have is if they're planning, they're in Southern California, they're planning on driving down to Mexico to visit their family for a week or so, what documentation do they need to get to and from the border, or between US and Mexico? What is sufficient?
Okay, if they going to travel by car, they have to apply for a temporal importation permit here at the consulate. They can find the information in the web page of Banjército, is the name. And then they can travel. If they are American citizens, they don't need visa. If they are foreigners in the United States and has American visa, they don't need Mexican visa to travel to Mexico for 6 months.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I do want to go back to Chan's really quickly on a question related to processing times. I know you mentioned for, there's the $60 expedited service, which is the 4 to 6 week time frame. Outside of that, the only way that folks can get it expedited any quicker than that would be if they have a qualifying emergency. Can you give more insight into that?
Yeah, so if someone does need their passport in less than 4 to 6 weeks, they would have to wait until within 72 hours of their trip to book an appointment at a passport agency. That doesn't mean wait 3 days before the trip. Within 2 weeks of qualifying for that 3-day window, just because that's how our appointment system works. Appointments open up 2 weeks out on an ongoing basis. So if they're traveling, let's say in the second week of June, that's 2 weeks out from now, they can book an appointment 3 days from that trip. Now, if they're having difficulty booking an appointment, they can ask to speak to one of our customer service representatives on the phone if they're not able to find an appointment through the automated systems online or over the phone.
And in terms of proof to allow them to get that appointment, what do they need if it's an emergency?
So they won't have to show proof. Oh yeah, so they'll have to submit proof at the time they appear for their appointment. So that could be an itinerary or it could be a letter documenting a proof of emergency, medical emergency overseas if they have to go see an immediate family member due to a medical emergency, and they have their flight booked. They can either print that out, or they can have that, on their phone, and they can show that to us upon applying and appearing at our agency.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I want to turn it over to Amy for a question about Real ID. A constituent from Chino is saying that their birthday is different on their birth certificate than on their passport. When applying for Real ID, if there is a discrepancy like that, what can folks do, or what should folks do?
Well, which is the correct date? I think that's important. So if there was a keying error on your passport, I think it would be wise to contact the passport agency and get that correct.
Mhm.
But for applying for a Real ID, you don't need to present both of those documents. So if the situation is you have an original certified birth certificate with the correct birth date, present that to us along with your 2 residency documents and provide your social security number, and that's acceptable.
Great, thank you, Amy.
Can I jump in too, just to add to what Amy had said? So if it is indeed an error on the passport, we replace those passports free of charge. There's a form that applicants can use and fill out to mail in their passport with the error and the proof of correction, such as their birth certificate, and we'll replace the passport free of charge while it's valid. We won't replace a passport that's expired already. But upon applying for a new passport, for example, they can show us the document that has the correct information on it, name, date of birth, sex, and we'll correct it on their next passport.
Great.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Because there is a confusion, because the passport, the date of birth is day, month, and year. And many people confused, because in the United States, first is month, day, and year. But the old passport is day, month, and year. And maybe there is a confusion in this case, just to clarify.
That's a good point that you make, Hugo. Going back to Chan's really quickly, you mentioned replacement of passports, things like that. So this is actually probably a common question that people have. It's been 1.5 years probably since they've used their passport. If they've lost it or misplaced it, what sort of recourse do they have to go about getting a new passport? It hasn't expired, so what can they do?
Well, number one, they should report that passport lost or stolen using our DS64 report of lost or stolen passport form. They can also go online and fill out that form and submit it online, or call our toll-free number to report their passport lost. It's important because they don't want their passport to be misused. That's their identity, and it could be used for all sorts of purposes. So number one, reporting it lost. And to get their passport replaced, unfortunately, they won't be able to renew that passport by mail. If they did have that passport, they would, be able to renew it by mail, but they'd have to apply in person again using the DS11 form and showing their birth certificate or a previous passport to that as their proof of citizenship, their ID, and submit a recent passport photo and pay the fees.
Great, thank you. In terms of travel to U.S. territories, Puerto Rico, things like that, what is needed? I know, this may be the first time that folks may be visiting those territories. What advice do you have for them who may be taking that travel there?
If it's a direct flight to a U.S. territory, there's no need for a passport. They can use their driver's license to travel to a U.S. territory. But if there is an international layover tied to that flight, then they would need a passport to pass through that international port.
Great, thank you. Amy, one more question I have here on the Real ID. What is a common issue that you're seeing or that the DMV is seeing when folks go to apply for these real ID or for these real IDs? Is there a common mistake that maybe people are making, or is there a common document that they're forgetting? Do you have any tips on that front?
I would say, so Real ID, I think nationwide is kind of really bringing a lot of folks out of the woodwork when it comes to different documents that they have. I think one of the issues we find is that we need an original certified birth certificate, and occasionally people will have photocopies of them, or they will have the hospital version of the birth certificate that has the cute little baby feet on it, but we need the actual, government issued document. It's generally on special type paper that has watermarks, generally has a seal affixed to it so that it can't be duplicated. That's what we're looking for, not a photocopy of that document. We cannot take photocopies. The other issue we have is—
Amy, in terms of birth certificates,
yeah.
What about folks that have sort of those small abstract ones? Do those work?
I do not believe abstract birth, if it states abstract across the top, I don't believe the abstract birth certificates are acceptable, but I would want to follow up with you. I think there's a little bit of nuance to that depending on kind of how and where those are issued. So if you do have a constituent that is running into issues with an abstract birth certificate, you can always reach out and contact me, and we're happy to have our folks take a look at that particular situation. The other situation is one that we ladies are usually the ones that run into, is that we're the ones that generally change our names. So when I applied for my Real ID, I needed to provide my birth certificate and my marriage certificate because I changed my name. They needed to know that Amy Tanner matched Amy Stewart, who was born and in this location and has this birth date. So sometimes if you've had multiple name changes, tracking from your original document to your current name can be quite a challenge. We've had situations where individuals were legally divorced, but they were never technically married. And so trying to find solutions for those individuals has been kind of challenging within this. So gather your paperwork early.
Thank you for providing some additional information on that front. I know that process can be a little sticky sometimes, but it looks like unless any folks submit an additional question through our chat, I think we got through all the ones that folks are submitting. I'm sure that others may have questions as they think about them when they're getting closer to their travels. So we're happy to connect anyone in the district with any of these folks here on our webinar to help you get some additional help with any issues you may be having. So definitely use us and them as a resource as you see fit. But with that, I will turn it over quickly to the Congresswoman for any last words that she may have on this webinar.
Well, thank you, Jacob, and thank you to each and every one of our guests with us today. It was very, very informative, from traveling, within our 50 states and territories to traveling abroad. You still need an identification. Try to get your Real ID if you can before that. It's always the best way to go, and there's still time for you to do that. And don't forget the kiddos. As a reminder, they are their own person. They have to have their own passport with their own photo, as difficult as that may be to take. My experience with getting passports and IDs for my kids is that short birth certificate doesn't work, so get the long form, for the proof of citizenship. So thank you for joining us. If you need anything from our office, you can log on to torres.house.gov while you're there. Sign up for our newsletter. If you don't have access to internet, call our office at 909-481-6474. Safe travels. With that said, let me just pitch. California is a great, beautiful state, very, very diverse. You can go to the mountains, you can go to the ocean, you can go to the desert. try to keep your dollars, your tourist dollars here in our beautiful state if you can. And if you can't, you know, Mexico is just just over the border. So it's a great place that Americans love to travel to. And the rest of our states are also beautiful places to go to. Thank you again. Be safe. Don't forget to carry your masks and wash your hands often. Take care of yourselves while you're traveling.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.